Welcome back to the Shadow Steam. You made it here somehow through the snow and the silence. Sit down, it's warm in here. For now. Tonight we're drifting into the quiet, haunted heart of winter, where the season of joy and family becomes something else entirely. These are true Christmas horror stories, moments that began with laughter, lights, and gifts under the tree, and ended with doors left open, whispers in the dark, and the kind of cold that doesn't just touch your skin, it settles inside you. Each story tonight carries a different kind of chill, a stranger's visit that should have never happened, a silent night inside a nursing home that refused to stay quiet, and a gift left under a tree that no one remembers wrapping. These aren't holiday tales to warm your heart. They're the kind that remind you how thin the walls are between comfort and fear. Most people watch, then scroll away on pretending they didn't feel anything. But you stayed. You listened. That's how it starts. Tell me, what time is it where you are right now? And where are you watching from? Type it in the comments. I want to see how far this darkness travels tonight. Now, get comfortable. Dim the lights and listen carefully, because once the snow starts falling, it's already too late to leave. Here are tonight's encounters. The second I heard the knock, I froze. It wasn't loud, just 3 soft taps against the wood. But in the middle of a blizzard at 11:47 p.m., it felt like a gunshot. My cabin sat halfway up a mountain road outside Fairview, Colorado. The kind of place where snow swallowed everything by December and you learned to keep quiet about being alone. I'd come up here to get space after the breakup. Space from people, from noise, from everything. I hadn't seen another soul in 3 days, so that knock didn't make sense. The wind howled against the windows, pushing dry flakes through the cracks I still hadn't sealed. I stared at the door from my spot on the couch, coffee mug halfway to my mouth, hand trembling just enough to spill. 3 more knocks. This time a little harder. I put the mug down and listened. The power had gone out an hour earlier, so the only light came from the dying fire and my phone screen. I checked it again, no service. Of course, I tried to rationalize. Maybe a hiker got caught in the storm. Maybe someone slid off the road. That was possible. I told myself that out loud. But my voice sounded small and wrong, like it didn't belong in the room anymore. When I finally stood, my knees cracked. I pulled my blanket tighter around me and crept toward the door. The window beside it was iced over, but I scraped at the frost until a small circle cleared. There was someone out there. He was standing about 10 feet from the porch light, a man, I think. No hat, no hood, just a dark jacket already crusted with snow. He wasn't moving, not shivering, not waving for help, just standing. I could barely make out his face. The way the snow blew, it looked like he was wearing some kind of mask. But when he tilted his head, I realized it was just his skin, pale and wet, reflecting the porch light in this dull, waxy way that made me feel sick. I should have said something, but all that came out was a shaky breath that fogged the glass. He must have seen the movement because his head turned, slow, unnatural, until I knew he was looking right at me through the little hole I'd wiped. Clear, that was the first moment I felt real. Fear. The kind that makes your heartbeat sound louder than the storm. Outside, he smiled. It was tiny and wrong, like his mouth didn't quite understand how to do it. Then he lifted his arm and knocked again, 3 times. Same rhythm. I backed away. Fast, almost tripped over the rug. Every thought in my head was screaming, don't open it. Just wait until morning. But then I saw his shape through the frosted glass again. Closer now. Right at the door, and then the handle moved just a little. Like he was testing it. The old brass knob rattled, then stopped. I heard the soft scrape of boots on the porch. And then, for the longest 10 seconds of my life, silence. The wind died. Even the fire seemed to hush itself, and then I heard it. Not a knock this time, but a voice. Cold night, huh? He said it like we were old friends. Calm, polite. Too calm. I didn't answer. I just stood there staring at the door, my breath fogging up the air in front of me. He chuckled. You gonna let me in? That's when I realized something that still doesn't make sense. He called me by name. Come on, Aaron, he said softly. You shouldn't be alone out here. I don't remember moving, but suddenly I was across the room, crouched behind the arm of the couch with my hand over my mouth. He knew my name. I hadn't told anyone I was staying here. Not even my sister. The lease was under my ex's name and he didn't even know I still had the key. So how the hell could this man know who I was? The fire popped and I jumped so hard my knee hit the floor. Pain shot up my leg, sharp enough to blur my vision for a second. When I looked back toward the door, I could still see his shadow through the frosted glass. Taller than before, or maybe just closer. "Aaron," he said again. Quieter this time. "You shouldn't ignore me. It's rude." His tone wasn't angry. It was almost playful, like this was some kind of sick joke. The doorknob rattled once more. Then I heard the faint creak of the porch as he stepped to the side. I used that second to grab my phone. Still no service. Just that little SOS symbol mocking me at the top of the screen. I thought about calling 911 anyway, just in case it went through. I typed the numbers. Nothing. Outside, the wind picked up again, howling like it was alive. I listened for footsteps, but the snow muffled everything. The only sound was my own pulse hammering in my ears, then a sharp tap on the window. Not the door this time. The window. I whipped my head toward it and saw a dark smear through the frost. Fingers, someone, dragging their hand slowly across the glass, was circling the cabin. I bolted to the kitchen and grabbed the heaviest thing within reach, a cast iron pan. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped it. I could see my reflection in the dark metal. Pale, wide-eyed, ridiculous. "Go away." I shouted, my voice cracking halfway through. "I'm armed." No answer. Just the hiss of wind sneaking through the seams of the old wooden walls. I stood there for a full minute, listening. Nothing. Then I dared to peek through the blinds above the sink. The porch light flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. Everything outside disappeared into white. For a moment I thought he was gone. I let out a shaky breath and started backing away. Then something brushed against the window again, and softer this time. Like fabric, I couldn't see anything now, but I heard it. That sound. A slow, steady scraping, metal against glass. I ran to the fireplace, grabbed a half-burned log and threw it in. Sparks flared, lighting up the cabin for a split second, and that's when I saw it. Something written in the condensation on the inside of the front window. Letters shaky and uneven, but clear enough to read. "I remember you." The words were dripping like they'd been traced by a wet finger. I froze. My brain tried to catch up. Inside. The message was written from the inside. I dropped the pan. It hit the floor with a dull thud that echoed through the small cabin. For the first time since the knocking started, I couldn't hear him outside. No footsteps, no scraping, no voice. Just the creak of the cabin and the fire breathing low. That's when my stomach dropped. The back door. It had been locked earlier, I was sure of it. But I hadn't checked since the storm started. And when I looked down the dark hallway leading to the mudroom, I saw it. Faint but visible. A trail of melting snow on the wooden floorboards. Small puddles. Fresh. Leading inside. My throat went dry. I couldn't breathe. The air suddenly felt colder, heavier. I whispered, "Please, no." Then from the darkness of the hallway, that same voice, calm, conversational, floated back to me. "I told you, Aaron, you shouldn't be alone out here." My body moved before my brain did. I grabbed the poker from the fireplace and backed into the corner, my heart slamming against my ribs. The hallway to the mudroom was dark, except for the faint orange flicker from the fire. I could still see the wet footprints. They stopped halfway across the wooden floor. He was inside. "Don't do this," I said, my voice shaking so bad it didn't sound like me. "Whoever you are, just take what you want and go." Nothing. Just the whisper of wind outside pressing against the walls like it was listening too. Then I heard it. The soft creak of a floorboard shifting weight. Not far, maybe 10 feet away. I forced myself to look down the hall again. The darkness seemed thicker now, like the air itself was solid. My own breath came out in white puffs. I whispered, "Please." Then something flickered. Not light, movement. A faint shadow slipping out of sight at the end of the hall. I ran. Not toward it, away. Straight into the bedroom. Slammed the door and locked it, pressing my shoulder against the wood like that would help. The cabin was small. If he was in here, there weren't many places to hide. And if I couldn't get out, I tried the window. Frozen shut. The glass fogged under my breath. I banged on it with the poker, but the old pane just rattled. Not even a crack. That's when I saw something glinting on the dresser across the room. My stomach twisted when I recognized it, my phone charger. The one I'd lost 2 days ago. I hadn't dropped it. I was sure. I'd torn the cabin apart looking for it. I thought maybe I'd left it in my car, but it was here. Neatly coiled, sitting on top of the dresser, like someone had found it for me. The air around me felt wrong, like the pressure had changed. Every instinct screamed to stay quiet. I could hear him walking now, slow, steady steps across the living room floor. Each step made the old boards sigh, then stop. He was standing right outside the bedroom door. I didn't breathe, didn't blink. The silence stretched until I thought I'd go insane. Then a soft whisper, almost kind. "Do you remember me yet?" My knees gave out. I slid down against the door, gripping the poker so hard my knuckles hurt. "No," I whispered. "I don't know you." He laughed once, low and quiet. "You will." Then the footsteps moved away. Slowly. Back toward the front room. I stayed there for what felt like an hour, listening to every creak, every gust of wind. Eventually, I forced myself to move. The firelight outside the crack under the door had dimmed. The logs were dying. I needed light. I needed a weapon that wasn't an antique fireplace tool. I opened the door an inch and peeked out. The living room looked empty. The front door was still shut. The window, the one with the message, was fogged again. Nothing visible on it now. But the puddles on the floor, there were more. And one of my boots, the left one, was gone. That made no sense. I turned, and that's when I noticed something on the wall by the fireplace. At first, I thought it was just soot. But when I leaned closer, I realized it was a photograph, a Polaroid. Pinned into the wood with a nail, it was me, standing right here, in this cabin, wearing the same sweater I had on right now. The angle was from outside, through the window. I yanked it down, my hands shaking. The corner of the photo had a fingerprint in something dark, maybe dirt. Maybe not. I flipped it over. There were words written in blue ink on the back. "You left the window unlocked last time." The room tilted. My stomach lurched. Last time? I stumbled backward until I hit the couch. My throat felt too tight to breathe. That's when I heard the old radio on the counter crackle to life. I hadn't even realized it was plugged in. It buzzed for a second, then hissed with static. Then through the noise, a voice came through. My own. It was me, whispering, saying the same words I'd said minutes ago. "Please." No. The static swallowed the rest, and I heard the door behind me creak open. The door creaked open behind me, slow and deliberate, like someone pushing it just far enough to watch me freeze. I didn't turn around. Couldn't. My whole body locked up. The radio was still hissing softly, replaying bits of my own voice in the static like it was mocking me. Then silence again. My mouth was dry. My fingers were still wrapped around the poker, but they'd gone numb. I forced myself to turn just enough to see the door. It was open a few inches. Nothing beyond it but darkness. "Can't stop," I said, barely a whisper. "Please." The wind outside picked up, shrieking against the walls, and for a second I thought I saw movement in the shadows. Then nothing, that was it. I was done waiting, I ran. Straight past the fire, past the couch, toward the front door. I grabbed the handle, locked. The deadbolt wouldn't budge. I yanked and twisted, but it felt like it was sealed from the outside. My panic boiled over. I hit the door with the poker, hard. The wood splintered, but it didn't open. That's when I heard the crunch of boots outside, slow, rhythmic, circling again. I pressed my ear to the door and listened. The footsteps stopped directly in front of me. Then, soft as a sigh, "Let me in, Aaron, it's cold out here." I backed away. My hands were shaking so bad the poker clanged against the floor. "No," I said, louder this time. "Leave me alone," he laughed, and quiet, muffled through the door. And then I heard a sound that didn't make sense at first. A knock. But it wasn't coming from the door. It was from behind me. I spun around, my breath catching in my throat. The knock came again, 3 soft taps, from the wall near the fireplace. Then another set. From the other side of the room, it was like the whole cabin was answering him. I backed into the center of the room, eyes darting everywhere. My reflection flickered in the window, not pale, terrified. The message on the glass was gone, but faint fingerprints still smudged the frost. I could feel him all around me. I grabbed my coat off the hook and shoved my arms through it. I didn't care about the storm anymore. I just needed to get out. The back door, that was my only shot. I bolted for the hallway, my boots slipping on the wet floor. The air grew colder the farther I went until my breath came out in white clouds again. The mudroom door was open. The snow had piled high just outside. The wind howled through the crack, scattering flakes across the floor. And there, half buried in snow, were two sets of footprints. One led in. The other stopped right at the threshold. Like whoever had walked in hadn't gone back out. My flashlight was on the counter. I grabbed it and flicked it on. The beam cut through the storm, catching shapes of trees and blowing snow. Then the light landed on something just past the porch. A shape, a person, slumped against the railing, half covered in snow. For one heart-stopping moment, I thought it was him. But as I stepped closer, I realized it wasn't. It was me, the coat, the boots, the same wool hat I was wearing. Even the small rip on the sleeve I'd gotten earlier that week, I stared, frozen. The face was covered by snow, but a few strands of my hair, my exact color, stuck out from the hood. My knees almost gave out. The beam of the flashlight trembled as I whispered, What is this?" The figure didn't move, didn't breathe. But the snow around it wasn't fresh. It had melted underneath like it had been there for days. I stumbled backward into the doorway, shaking. Then the voice came again right behind my ear. "See? I told you. You've been here before," I screamed and swung the flashlight, hitting only air. The light flared and went out, leaving me in complete darkness. I could hear breathing now, slow, calm, and way too close. I turned and ran back toward the living room, tripping over something on the floor. My knees hit the wood hard, but I didn't care. I crawled forward, reaching for the dim orange glow of the fire. When I got there, I saw something lying in front of the hearth, another Polaroid. This one showed the same scene as the last, the cabin, me inside. But now I was standing at the window, looking out into the snow. And behind me, just barely visible in the reflection of the glass, was him right where I was standing now. I dropped the photo, heart hammering. I could still feel his breath, faint and cold, against the back of my neck. And then, for the first time, I realized something that made my stomach twist into knots. There was no sound outside anymore, no wind. No storm, nothing but silence. The silence was worse than the storm. I stood in the middle of the room, the air cold enough to bite the inside of my nose. My breath hung in front of me, and for the first time since the knocking started, I couldn't tell if I was hearing real sounds or just the ringing in my ears. The fire was almost out. One last ember hissed and died, and the darkness folded over everything. Somewhere behind me, a board creaked. I turned, poker raised, heart pounding so hard it hurt. Nothing moved. The air was heavy still. The only light came from my phone's weak glow on the table. I ran for it, fumbling to turn on the flashlight again. When the beam hit the far wall, I froze. The back door was open. Snow drifted in, thin and slow, like the storm had been waiting for permission. The footprints I'd seen before were almost gone, the fresh snow already swallowing them. I forced myself to step closer. My entire body was shaking, but I needed to see. I needed to know. The cold slapped me as soon as I reached the doorway. I aimed the light toward the figure I'd seen before, the one half buried in snow. Gone. The porch was empty. Just a hollow outline pressed into the drift, like something heavy had been there and then disappeared. That broke me. I started screaming, calling for help, calling for anyone. My voice bounced off the trees, came back small and useless. Then I saw it, down the slope. Maybe 20 feet from the cabin, a shape moved through the snow, a flashlight beam cutting in and out between the trees. A voice yelled, "Hello? Is someone there?" For a second I didn't move, afraid it was him again. But the beam steadied and I caught sight of a bright yellow parka, rescue orange underneath. My legs gave out with relief. I stumbled toward the light, waving my arms, shouting until my throat burned. When I reached them, two men grabbed me, pulling me upright. "You're lucky," one said. "Another hour and you'd have frozen solid." I couldn't even answer. I just kept whispering, "He was here. He was in the cabin." They looked at each other, confused. They led me down to a snowcat waiting on the road. One of them offered me a blanket. The cabin shrank behind us, swallowed by the storm. At the ranger station, under fluorescent lights, I finally stopped shaking. They gave me tea, asked the same questions over and over. I told them everything. The knocks, the voice, the footprints, the photos. When I mentioned the body on the porch, the ranger stiffened. "You're sure you saw that?" "Yes," I said. "It looked like me." They exchanged another look and said nothing for a long time. The next morning, one of them drove me back up to collect my things. The storm had eased, the sky washed clean. The cabin looked smaller than I remembered. Too ordinary. We stepped inside. Everything was where I'd left it, except the photos were gone. No wet footprints, no broken door, no message on the glass. The ranger checked every room, even the crawl space. "No one's been here," he said. "You sure this wasn't a dream?" I didn't answer. I just looked down at the floor near the fireplace. There was a dark spot there, water damage maybe, shaped almost like a boot print. He didn't notice it. When he stepped outside to radio the station, I went to the window. For a second, my own reflection stared back, pale, hollow-eyed. Then I saw it. A small square of white tucked behind the curtain rod. I reached up and pulled it free. A Polaroid me from behind sitting right here at the window. On the back, written in the same shaky handwriting as before. "I found you again." The ranger called my name from outside. I shoved the photo into my pocket and didn't tell him. I left the mountain that afternoon. I sold my car 2 towns over and stayed with my sister for months. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind hits the windows just right, I swear I can hear it again. That soft, patient knocking. 3 taps. The same rhythm, and every time I wonder if next time I open the door, I'll be the one standing outside. The first thing that made me uneasy wasn't the cold. It was the humming. It started right after lights out when the hallways turned that strange half-gray color under the emergency bulbs. I was finishing charts at the nurse's station, trying to keep myself awake with instant coffee, when I heard it. Low, tuneless, coming from somewhere down Wing C. At first I thought it was the radio. We keep one by the medication cart, always tuned to some easy listening station for the residents. But when I walked over, the radio was silent, unplugged. Its cord coiled neatly on top. The humming went on. I followed it past room 214. Then 216. The long corridor smelled like disinfectant and cinnamon air freshener, the usual Christmas attempt. Every door was closed. Everyone was supposed to be asleep. It sounded like an old woman's voice. Soft, breathy, sleep in heavenly peace, I froze. That's what she was humming, Silent Night. I glanced at the clock above the supply closet. 11:48 p.m. The other aide, Connor, was outside smoking. I could see the orange dot of his cigarette through the snow-fogged glass doors at the end of the hall. "Mrs. Lowe," I whispered, tapping the doorframe of 218. She loved Christmas carols. Maybe she'd left her TV on again. No answer. Just that humming, a little louder now. I pushed the door open a few inches. Her room was dark except for the red blink of the oxygen concentrator. Mrs. Lowe was asleep, mouth open, chest rising and falling under the blanket. The humming stopped the moment I stepped inside. I waited, nothing. Then, behind me, from farther down the hall, the same melody started again. Slower this time. Like whoever was doing it wanted me to follow. I did. The sound led me to the rec room, where the Christmas tree still blinked with mismatched lights. Someone had unplugged half the string, so only the top twinkled. Underneath sat a stack of wrapped gifts from families that hadn't visited yet. The heating vent rattled. My own reflection stared back from the dark TV screen. The humming had stopped again. "Hello?" I said. "If you're out of bed, you need to go back before a shadow shifted in the TV glass." For half a second I thought it was my reflection moving, but the angle was wrong. It was standing behind me. I spun around. No one there. Just the hallway stretching away into dim light. I told myself it was exhaustion. Double shifts do weird things to your head. Still, I turned on every light switch I could find on the way back to the station. Connor came in a few minutes later, brushing snow off his jacket. "You look like you saw a ghost," he joked. I almost laughed, but something in my throat wouldn't let me. He poured himself coffee. "You hear the carolers earlier?" "Thought I heard music outside." "No," I said automatically. Then I added, "You sure it wasn't from Wing C?" He frowned. "Wing C's empty except for Mrs. Lowe and those 2 hospice cases." "Why?" "Nothing." I looked at the security monitor. The feeds flickered between cameras. Front entrance, dining area, hallway corners. Static jumped across the bottom of the Wing C screen every few seconds. Connor followed my gaze. Yeah, that one's been glitching since Monday. Maintenance never came. A movement flashed across the monitor before I could answer. Just a shape, small, thin white gown maybe, crossing from one doorway to another in wing CI blinked hard. When the feed refreshed, the hallway was empty again. Did you see that? I asked. See what? I rewound the footage a few seconds. The recording showed nothing but static and then the empty hall. Maybe I was losing it. Maybe the humming was in my head too. At midnight, the call light for room 220 went off. That was Mr. Barton, the hospice patient who hadn't spoken in 2 weeks. Connor and I exchanged looks. He grabbed the vitals card and followed me. When we entered, the room was dark except for the tiny bulb above the bed. Mr. Barton lay still, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. His lips moved slightly, forming a single word. I leaned closer. "What's that, Mr. Barton?" His breath rattled out. "Carol's." Then his gaze shifted past my shoulder toward the doorway. Connor whispered, "What the hell?" In the reflection of the glass window on the opposite wall, I saw them, figures, 5 or 6 maybe, standing in the hall. Their outlines were pale, blurred by the frosted glass. One of them tilted its head like it was listening. I turned around fast. The hallway was empty. When I looked back, Mr. Barton had closed his eyes again. Flatline tone from the monitor pierced the silence. Connor called for the on-call nurse while I just stood there, staring at that window at my own reflection shaking. And under the alarm, faint but steady, I heard it again. Sleep in heavenly peace. They took Mr. Barton's body away just before 1 a.m. The orderlies wheeled him out under a white sheet that brushed the floor, and the squeak of the gurney wheels echoed all the way down the corridor. When the front doors shut behind them, the whole place felt heavier, like the building itself was holding its breath. Connor muttered, "That makes 5 this month," then went out back again to smoke. I stayed at the station trying to finish the incident chart. My fingers kept missing the keyboard. I couldn't stop glancing at the hallway camera for wing C, waiting for another flicker of movement. Every time the screen glitched, my stomach flipped. At 1:17 a.m., the humming started again. It came from the ceiling vents this time, so faint I almost thought it was the air system kicking on. Then I recognized the tune, Silent Night. Same slow rhythm, same soft voice that couldn't quite find the right key. I pushed back from the desk and followed it. My shoes squeaked on the waxed tile, the sound bouncing ahead of me. The closer I got to the end of the corridor, the colder the air became. The heating registers were blasting warm air everywhere else, but here it felt like someone had opened a window to the snow outside. Room 222's door was ajar. I remembered it was supposed to be vacant. Mrs. Nguyen had been moved to rehab earlier that week. I nudged the door open with my foot. The bed was stripped bare. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and pine cleaner, and sitting right in the middle of the floor was a little battery-powered candle, flickering weakly. I hadn't put it there. No one had reason to. When I stepped inside, the humming stopped. The only sound was the candle's faint buzz. I picked it up, intending to take it back to the supply closet, but the second I did, the intercom clicked on behind me. A burst of static, then the softest whisper, "Are you awake?" I dropped the candle. It rolled under the bed and went dark. The intercom crackled again, louder this time. A man's voice, thin, breathy, singing the same carol. "Round yon virgin mother and child." Every syllable broke with interference like an old record grinding against a needle. I ran into the hall and grabbed the wall phone. The line was dead. Only a high hiss like someone breathing right into my ear. "Connor," I yelled down the hall. "Connor, you need to come here." No answer. Just the hum of fluorescent lights and that faint singing still leaking through the vents. I forced myself to breathe. One task at a time, check the residence, make sure no one's wandering. That's what I told myself. Room 214, Mrs. Lowe, still asleep, her oxygen mask fogging gently. Room 216, Mr. Miller snoring. Room 218, empty except for the half-finished puzzle on the table. When I stepped back into the corridor, the smell hit me. Something sweet, almost floral, cutting through the disinfectant. I followed it to the day room. The Christmas tree lights were off again. Only the star at the top blinked, now slow and uneven. Beneath it, the stack of wrapped gifts had been rearranged. 3 of them were open, paper ripped neatly aside as if someone had unwrapped them carefully, not in a rush. Inside one box was a framed photograph, Mrs. Lowe's family picture. I recognized her in the center holding a baby. Another box held a crocheted scarf. The third was empty except for a small card that read, "For the night staff." I didn't remember any gift labeled for us. I bent down to pick it up, and on the back, written in shaky blue ink, were the words, "We'll sing for you soon." A noise behind me made me spin around. The TV in the corner had turned itself on, screen glowing gray. Snow static filled the room, bright and soundless. Then shapes began to move in the blur. Faces maybe, mouths open like they were mid-song. I yanked the plug from the wall. The screen stayed lit for a full heartbeat before it went black. That's when the hallway alarms began to ring. Call lights flared red one after another, every room on the wing lighting up at once. It looked like a line of warning beacons down a runway. I could hear doors clicking, beds creaking, people stirring, voices mumbling the same few words in unison. Silent night. Holy night. I ran for the nurse's station. Connor wasn't there. His coffee mug was tipped over, still steaming. The security monitors all showed the same feed now. Every camera frozen on the corridor, each angle catching a blurry figure standing at the far end, just out of focus. They weren't moving. They weren't even breathing, just watching. For a long second, I thought the power had glitched again. Then one of the figures on the screen raised a hand and waved. At the exact same moment, the overhead lights flickered. When they steadied, someone was standing in the real hallway too. Just a silhouette, small, frail, like an elderly woman in a hospital gown. I whispered, "Mrs. Lowe?" The figure tilted its head. The next blink of light, it was gone. The corridor lights buzzed overhead, too bright after the flicker. I called out again, louder this time. "Mrs. Lowe? Hello?" Only the hum of the air vents answered. The call lights still blinked red down the entire wing, one after another like a heartbeat that had gone wrong. I moved toward them, forcing my feet to keep going, clipboard shaking in my hand. Room 221st. Empty bed. The sheets still warm, pillow indented. I checked under the bathroom door, no shadow, no sound. Room 218, same thing. It was like everyone had decided to get up and walk out at the same time. Halfway down the hall, I found Connor's ID badge on the floor. The clip was bent as if it had been yanked off. I picked it up and whispered his name, but the word felt swallowed by the building. When I reached the end of the corridor, I saw a faint light spilling from the chapel. The little room was mostly used for Sunday visits, but now it glowed with a soft gold that didn't belong to any of our bulbs. I pushed the door open. Every resident who could walk or be wheeled was there. A dozen at least. Some stood, some sat on benches. All of them were humming the same low, breathy version of Silent Night. Their eyes were closed. Their heads swayed slightly, perfectly in time. Connor was kneeling by the front row, frozen like he didn't dare interrupt. He turned his head when he heard me. His face looked gray. "They just came here," he whispered. All at once, I stepped closer. The air was thick with that floral smell again. Sweet, almost comforting, except it made my chest tight. The tree at the front of the chapel twinkled faintly. Someone had turned on the star topper, its light pulsing with the rhythm of their humming. "Mr. Miller," I said, touching his shoulder. His eyes opened but didn't focus on me. His lips moved, still following the song. He was mouthing words that weren't quite right, half-formed like he was remembering rather than singing. Then I realized something. They were all singing slightly different versions. One said holy, another lonely. One murmured home. Each voice faded in and out, patching together like a broken choir. Connor whispered. They started after the power blinked. Said they were waiting for someone. Who? He shook his head. Didn't ask. I moved toward the front. The altar cloth fluttered in the heater's weak draft. A small radio sat there, one of those old cassette players we used for Sunday hymns. The tape was spinning even though the play button wasn't pressed. The reels turned on their own, whispering fragments of music into the air. Then the PA system clicked again. A woman's voice this time, thin and calm. All is calm. I spun around. The speaker above the chapel door was dark. The sound was still coming, though, traveling through the vents. Connor reached for the plug on the wall outlet. The moment he touched it, the singing stopped. Every resident froze mid-breath, eyes open, fixed straight ahead. The silence that followed was heavier than any noise. Then Mrs. Lowe began to cry. Not loud, just a thin, helpless sound that didn't stop. The others joined one by one, a soft keening that built until the whole chapel vibrated with it. Connor backed away, hands up. "We have to call emergency," he said. Something's wrong with the air." I nodded, but before we could move, the building groaned, an old, tired creak that traveled through the beams. The lights flickered again. The residents all looked upward together, eyes following something I couldn't see. Then just as quickly, the moment passed. One by one, they slumped in their seats, breathing slow, as if someone had turned a switch off inside them. The chapel was quiet except for the heater hum. Connor whispered, "We're leaving now." We guided those who were still awake back to their rooms. They didn't speak, didn't resist. They just stared straight ahead and kept humming under their breath, faint and tuneless. By 3 a.m., the halls were silent again. Connor went to call his supervisor from the front office landline. I sat at the nurse's desk listening to the clock tick. My hand smelled like disinfectant and pine. When he came back, he looked shaken. "The phone line's fine," he said. "But every time I dial out, all I hear is music. Christmas music. Not from a station, like an old recording." I wanted to tell him to stop, to leave it alone, but before I could, the call light for room 214 blinked. Mrs. Lowe again. We went together this time. Her door was wide open and the air inside felt icy. She was sitting upright, oxygen mask off, humming quietly. When she saw me, she smiled. "They sang so pretty," she said. "You should have let them finish." "Who, Mrs. Lowe?" She pointed toward the window. Frost covered the glass, patterns curling like handwriting. In the center, cleared by someone's fingertip, were 2 words. "Join us," Connor whispered. She couldn't have reached that far. I reached out and touched the pane. The glass was warm. The words began to melt away, water trailing down like tears. By the time the clock crept past 4, the building had gone still again. Too still. No humming, no footsteps from the other wings, just the soft wheeze of the furnace and the faint crackle of snow pressing against the windows. Connor sat slumped in one of the visitor chairs, rubbing his eyes. He'd stopped trying to make outside calls. Every time he picked up the receiver, that faint Christmas music started again. Different versions, all warped and slow, as if the tapes had stretched. I couldn't shake what Mrs. Lowe had said. They sang so pretty. When I walked back past her room, she was asleep again, her hand clutching the photo that had been under the tree earlier. The oxygen tube hissed softly beside her. I almost convinced myself it was over. Then the generator kicked on. The lights didn't flicker. They dimmed, like something was drawing power away from the system. The emergency bulbs glowed a dull orange, and through the intercom, that low static started to build again. Not a voice this time. Not even a song. Just breathing. I stood there frozen, listening. It wasn't coming from one speaker. It was in all of them. Above every doorway, from the dining hall to the recreation room, a faint synchronized exhale, in and out, like the entire building had lungs. Connor whispered, "Maybe it's the air system," but we both knew it wasn't. I walked to the main panel and flipped the switch to cut the PA line. The breathing stopped, instantly. Then, from down the hallway, someone began to clap. Slow, deliberate. 1 pair of hands. 3 beats, a pause, then 3 more. It came from the chapel again. "Don't," Connor said, standing up fast. "Don't go back there." But I was already moving. The chapel door was cracked open. A faint gold glow spilled through, same as before. The candlelight shimmered against the metal railing. Inside, every seat was empty, except for one. At the front, where the altar used to be, someone had set up a chair. On it sat a figure wrapped in a blanket, head bowed. I thought it was one of the residents at first. "Sir, ma'am, you're not supposed to be..." The figure raised its head. It was Connor, or it looked like him. Same uniform, same messy hair. But when I turned around, the real Connor was right behind me, staring. The thing in the chair smiled. "Almost morning," it said. The voice was his too. "You'll hear them soon." I stepped back, hand groping for the wall. The figure's eyes didn't blink. The skin around them looked pale, stretched thin like paper. Then the radio on the altar clicked. The tape inside whirred and a child's voice began to sing softly. All is calm. All is bright. Connor grabbed my arm. We're leaving. Right now. I didn't argue. We ran down the corridor, shoes slipping on the tile. The sound followed us, first the song, then faint laughter, then silence. We burst through the double doors into the front lobby. The automatic doors didn't open. They shuddered once and froze halfway. I hit the emergency release. Nothing. The button clicked uselessly. Then, faintly through the glass, we saw movement outside. Figures again, standing in the snow just beyond the parking lot lights. Their shapes were faint, blurred by the flurries, but I could see enough to know. They were holding hands, swaying side to side, like carolers. Connor whispered, "Do you see them?" Before I could answer, the fire alarm shrieked. Red strobes flashed against the walls. Smoke curled under the doors leading to Wing C. We ran toward it. The air was cold and sharp, not smoke, just frost. The sprinklers hadn't triggered. Instead, the ceiling vents poured out little clouds of white vapor. It looked like fog rolling through the halls, and in that fog, voices. Not singing now, talking. Fragments. Almost home. It's warm there. Come see. We reached the nurse's station. The monitors were all white static again except for one. The chapel camera. On the screen, the figure that looked like Connor was still sitting in the chair, smiling directly into the lens. His mouth moved slowly, forming words I couldn't hear, but I knew what he was saying. All is calm. All is bright. I slammed the power switch, and the feed went black. By 5:30, the alarm reset itself. The fog thinned. The generator quieted. And outside, the carolers were gone. Only footprints remained, dozens of them, leading from the trees to the front steps, and stopping right there, as if they'd walked straight into the building and vanished. We waited for the day shift. Neither of us spoke. The first hint of dawn was just starting to touch the snow when the front doors finally unstuck and slid open. The new nurse on duty looked at us like we were ghosts ourselves. "You both look awful," she said. "Everything okay?" Connor tried to laugh. It came out hollow. "You tell me," she frowned, glancing at the sign-in sheet. "Weird," she said. "You two weren't even listed for the night. The schedule says coverage was transferred to agency staff." I stared at her. "We've been here since 8. Who signed the log?" She held it out. 2 signatures, neat and careful. Both our names written in someone else's handwriting. Morning light changes everything, or at least it's supposed to. When the sun came through the front windows, the nursing home looked ordinary again. Quiet, beige, the kind of place where nothing terrifying should ever happen. The residents were fine. Every single one of them. Their vitals were normal. Their rooms were clean. And when I asked if they remembered anything from the night before, most of them just blinked and smiled politely. Mrs. Lowe told me she'd slept better than she had in years. Connor didn't say a word. He just packed his things, signed his name in silence, and left before the next shift finished their handoff. I haven't heard from him since. His locker's still there, untouched. His jacket still hanging from the hook like he meant to come back for it. The administrator called me into her office that afternoon. She was polite, almost kind, but her eyes kept flicking toward the report I'd filed. "You described residents singing?" she asked carefully. "And seeing someone who wasn't really there?" I started to explain, but she interrupted gently. "You've been doing doubles all week. Holidays are brutal. Sleep deprivation can cause—" "I wasn't hallucinating," I said. Connor saw it too. "The monitors," she closed the folder. "The monitors recorded nothing after 11:30 p.m. There's a gap until 5. Power glitch during the snowstorm, that's all. You were probably disoriented from the outage." I didn't argue. I just nodded. What else was I supposed to do? Still, that night when I went home, I couldn't make myself go to bed. I sat in the dark with my coat still on, staring at the frost on my own windows. The heater made the same soft hum as the vents at the home. Every time it clicked on, I felt my stomach knot. A few days later, a maintenance guy I barely knew came to drop off the equipment log I'd requested. He lingered awkwardly at the door before saying, "Funny thing, One of the backup generators failed that night, shorted out the chapel feed. When we replaced it, we found something inside the casing. He held up a plastic evidence bag. Inside was an old melted cassette tape. The label was faded, but I could still make out the words scribbled in red pen. Christmas Eve, Resident Choir 1998. I asked him where he found it exactly. He said, "Inside the ventilation duct above the altar." Then he smiled like it was nothing and left. That night I went back to work. The building was bright, busy again, full of visitors carrying poinsettias and cheap boxes of cookies. Everything felt normal, but when I passed the chapel, I saw that someone had left a candle burning on the front pew. The wax had pooled over the wood, still warm, still soft. And on the wall above the radio shelf, faint under the paint, there was writing, barely visible unless the light hit it just right, "Sleep in heavenly peace." I told myself it was a leftover decoration, some message from a previous Christmas, but part of me knew it hadn't been there before. The new night nurse, a girl barely 20, asked if I could stay late to help with meds. I almost said no, but instead I smiled and said yes, because what else was I going to do? Pretend it never happened? Around midnight, she went out to smoke, leaving me alone at the station. The hall was quiet again. The same hum from the vents, the same pale glow from the emergency bulbs. I sipped the bitter coffee and tried to laugh at myself. It was just stress, fatigue. All the explanations they'd given me made sense. I even started humming a tune under my breath to fill the silence. Then I froze. It was Silent Night, and I hadn't meant to hum it. The melody was just there, waiting somewhere in my throat. I turned toward the intercom, half expecting static. But nothing came, only the soft, rhythmic sound of the heater. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was listening, that maybe the song had never belonged to them or to me, but to this place, passed down like a ritual nobody remembered starting. When my shift ended at 6, I shut off the lights, grabbed my bag, and headed for the door. Outside, the snow had frozen into hard, glittering sheets across the parking lot. The sky was a pale pink, the kind of morning that should have felt peaceful. But just before I reached my car, I heard it again, so faint I thought it might be the wind. A voice, low and cracked with age, humming through the vent above the entrance. "Sleep in heavenly peace." I stood there until it faded, watching my breath hang in the air, trying to convince myself it wasn't real. It's been 2 weeks now. Every night when I turn on the heater at home, I hear it again. Sometimes just the tune, sometimes the whisper of words beneath it. I stopped mentioning it to anyone. They'd think I need rest or medication or both. Maybe they're right. Maybe it's only in my head. But sometimes, on the edge of sleep, I swear I can still see them in the snow. Hands linked, swaying side to side, waiting for the next verse to start, and before I drift off, I catch myself humming too. I didn't plan on going back. After what happened, I told myself I'd find another job. Anywhere else. I started scrolling listings, urgent care, hospice, even a night clerk position at a pharmacy. But every time I almost sent an application, I'd freeze. My hands would start shaking, and I'd feel that same stale, cold air from the nursing home vents on my neck. It's hard to explain how a place can hold you, how it can whisper your name long after you leave. A week after I quit, the administrator called. Her voice was careful, like she didn't want to startle me. "We've had another incident," she said. "No one's hurt, but, well, the residents are talking about you. They say you sang to them last night." I didn't. Obviously, I hadn't been there, but she sounded so certain. "They said you stood in the doorway," she continued, "and you sang the same song as before. Silent Night." I wanted to hang up, to tell her it wasn't funny, but something in her tone stopped me. She wasn't joking. She sounded tired, maybe even afraid. I asked who saw it. She said all of them. That night I barely slept. I kept hearing faint music, maybe from a neighbor's apartment, maybe my mind filling silence. Around 3 a.m., I checked my front door just to be sure it was locked. It was, but on the floor by the threshold lay something that hadn't been there before. A small folded piece of paper, damp around the edges from melted snow. Inside, written in thin, looping handwriting, "All is calm, all is bright. See you Christmas Eve, no address, no name, just that." The days blurred after that. I told myself it was a prank, someone from work trying to mess with me, or maybe Connor's weird idea of closure. But every time I reached for my phone to call him, I remembered the last thing I saw in that chapel. him sitting there, smiling through the static. I started noticing small things around my apartment. My thermostat blinking error, the hum in my vent turning rhythmic, the faint smell of pine cleaner even though I hadn't used any. Then the humming started again, softer this time, coming from somewhere inside the walls. I pressed my ear against the vent and held my breath. For a moment there was only silence, then clear as day, a woman's voice, gentle and close, "Come back. We're waiting." 2 nights before Christmas Eve, I drove past the nursing home just to see it. The lot was half buried in snow, the windows glowing that same dim yellow. It looked peaceful, normal. But when I slowed by the front entrance, I saw shapes in the lobby. Residents? Staff? I couldn't tell. They were standing in a half circle, heads bowed, hands linked. The intercom above the door crackled to life as I sat there. "Sleep in heavenly peace." The same voice. I don't remember turning off the car or walking inside, but I remember the sound of the door shutting behind me. The smell of disinfectant and cinnamon air freshener hit me all at once. The night nurse at the desk looked up, startled. "You're not scheduled," she said. "I know," I told her. "I just forgot something in the chapel." She hesitated but didn't stop me. People rarely question someone who looks certain of where they're going. The hallways were quiet, the same gray half-light from the emergency bulbs painting everything in washed-out colors. I passed room 214, Mrs. Lowe's room. Empty. The nameplate was blank. In the chapel, everything was different. No chair, no radio, just the faint scent of melted candle wax and dust. I walked up to the front and looked at the wall where the message had been. The paint had been redone, clean and smooth. But when I leaned close, I could still see the faintest impression beneath it. Like a scar under new skin, "Sleep in heavenly peace." I don't know how long I stood there before I heard it again. The faintest hum from the vent above the altar. Not one voice this time, many. Layered, soft, patient. And under it, a sound that froze me. Footsteps behind me. I turned around. Connor was standing in the doorway. He looked the same. Tired, pale, his uniform clean but faded. "You came back," he said, smiling faintly. "I shouldn't have," he nodded. "Neither should I." He stepped closer and I saw it, frost gathering on his collar, melting slowly as it reached his neck. "They only sing for the ones who stay," he whispered. When the morning staff found me, I was sitting in the front pew, alone. No sign of Connor. No footprints in the snow except mine. The administrator said I'd had some kind of breakdown, that I must have come in overnight without signing the log. She asked what I remembered. I told her I wasn't sure. I told her I'd probably fallen asleep. She seemed relieved, like that was the answer she'd hoped for. They offered me time off, counseling, medication. I accepted all of it. But last night, when I finally slept again, I dreamed of that chapel. Everyone was there, Mrs. Lowe, Mr. Barton, even Connor. They were humming softly, smiling at me. And somewhere in the middle of it, I realized I wasn't standing. I was sitting, in the front pew. Just like before. And when I woke up this morning, my apartment smelled like pine cleaner again. The vents were humming. I didn't tell my therapist everything. You can't. Not when the truth sounds like a dream you still half believe in. So I said the safe words instead. Burnout, trauma, exhaustion. They nodded like they'd heard it 100 times before. Maybe they had. But when I mentioned the humming, how it still came through the vents at home, they gave me that look. The gentle one. The one that says you're tired without saying it out loud. So now I lie. I tell them the sound's gone, that I'm sleeping better, that I'm not checking the clock every night at 11:47 p.m. waiting for it to start, but it hasn't stopped. It just changed. The humming doesn't come from the vents anymore. It comes from inside my head, a faint vibration just under the noise of thought, as if my mind is trying to hum along to something it doesn't fully remember. Sometimes it's just a few notes. Sometimes it's the whole song. And sometimes, like last night, it comes with words. All is calm, all is bright. I woke up sitting on the floor by my bed, phone light still on. A half-written message to Connor glowing on the screen. I don't remember typing it, but the words were simple. I hear them again, the text never sent. His number doesn't exist anymore. 3 days before Christmas, I drove to the nursing home again. I told myself it was for closure, Maybe to drop off cards for the residents. I even bought a box of those cheap ones from the pharmacy, snowflakes and reindeer on the front. The parking lot was empty except for one plow truck. The building looked different, freshly painted, but the same hollow quiet sat in the air. When I walked inside, the receptionist smiled like she didn't recognize me. "I used to work nights here," I said. "Oh," she answered politely. "Before the new management?" That stopped me. "New management?" She nodded. "They reopened in October. Renovations, the old place shut down after that fire last winter." I felt my stomach drop. "Fire?" She flipped through her logbook, casual, like she was reading weather notes. "Yeah, December 24th. Electrical issue in the chapel. They said no one was hurt, but the records were a mess after." No one was hurt. I didn't say anything. I just stood there staring at the hallway beyond her desk. The smell of disinfectant and pine drifted faintly through the air vents. Clean and familiar. Somewhere deeper in the building, faint music played. A Christmas song, slow and scratchy, like it was coming from an old radio. I asked who was playing it. She smiled. "We keep a little speaker in the common room for the residents. It helps them sleep." I wandered to the doorway of the new chapel. The paint was fresh, the lights modern, everything sleek and white. But when I stepped inside, I knew it was the same room. I could feel it. Someone had placed a new tree by the wall, silver ornaments, fake snow. Beneath it, one single wrapped box. No label. I should have left right then, but instead I walked up to the altar. The heater clicked on above me, and for a second, just one, I swore I heard breathing through the vent. I whispered, "Connor?" Nothing. But when I turned to leave, I saw the reflection in the glass door. Behind me, a figure stood at the altar, head bowed, humming softly. The same voice. The same tune. I didn't turn around. I just kept walking until I was outside again, snow crunching under my shoes. Now back in my apartment, I keep hearing that voice every time the heater turns on. Not loud, not even constant, just enough to remind me it's there. I haven't slept properly in days. I caught myself writing words on the window condensation this morning. 2 little phrases. "Sleep in heavenly peace." Join us. I don't remember doing it. I just remember watching my hand move like it wasn't mine. It's Christmas Eve tonight. I keep checking the time. 11:12, 11:27, 11:43, like something's counting down. Outside, the snow's coming down thick, soft, silent. The world feels smaller in this kind of cold, like sound doesn't travel as far. I'm sitting on the couch now, lights off, just the soft glow of the window. The hum from the vent is steady. Peaceful almost. I tell myself I'll move in the new year, somewhere warm, somewhere without snow or Christmas or songs that won't leave your head. But as the clock hits 11:47, the humming shifts. It's not in my head anymore. It's coming from the hall outside my door, slow, rhythmic. And this time I hear footsteps too, light, deliberate, like someone pacing back and forth, waiting for me to open it. I tell myself not to move, not to look, but the humming grows louder, clearer, until I can make out the words, whispered in a voice that sounds almost like my own. "Sleep in heavenly peace." I close my eyes, and I start humming along. I noticed the box the morning after Christmas. It wasn't there the night before. I swear it wasn't. It sat dead center under the tree, wrapped in matte black paper with a silver bow. No tag, no handwriting, no sign of where it came from. Just perfect surgical wrapping. The thing that bothered me most wasn't the gift itself. It was how my dog, Baxter, refused to go near it. He'd been sniffing around the tree all week, tearing at ribbons, wagging his tail at every new scent. But when he saw that black box, he froze. His tail dropped flat and he started to growl low in his throat. I laughed at first. "Guess you're not a fan of mystery gifts, huh?" He didn't stop growling. It was still early. 7:45 maybe. My living room smelled like pine needles and burnt coffee. The TV was still on from the night before. The local news looping through the same bland holiday headlines. Icy roads, travel delays, cheerful weather updates that didn't quite match the gray outside. I crouched down beside the box. It was heavier than it looked. When I shook it, something shifted inside. Not loose like a toy, but soft, solid, muffled. I should have just thrown it out right then. But curiosity is a disease, and Christmas morning makes you reckless. I peeled the tape slowly, careful not to tear the paper. I don't know why that mattered, but it did. When I lifted the lid, the smell hit me first. Faintly metallic like cold iron or old coins. Inside was a folded red sweater. At least I thought it was a sweater. The knit was thick, handmade maybe. Someone had gone through the trouble of wrapping it nicely, but there was no tag, no size, no brand. Just a single white note card sitting on top. I picked it up. The handwriting was small, almost childlike. For when it gets cold again. That's all it said. I looked around the room like maybe someone would pop out and say, "Gotcha." But the house was empty, just me, Baxter, and the hum of the heater. I checked my phone for messages. Nothing. No family had stopped by. No deliveries were scheduled. The security cam app showed nothing but snow blowing across the porch around 2 a.m. Still, part of me thought maybe it was from my sister, Lauren. She'd been weirdly distant this Christmas. No calls, no text, not even a card. Maybe this was her peace offering, a sentimental gesture. I texted her anyway. "Hey, did you drop off a gift here last night? A sweater?" No reply. Baxter kept pacing by the tree, whining softly. I finally gave up and shoved the box onto the coffee table, thinking I'd deal with it later. But I didn't make it far. As I was walking into the kitchen, I heard it. A faint sound, soft enough that I thought I'd imagined it. A heartbeat. Not loud. Just a dull, steady thump coming from the living room. I turned around slowly. Baxter was backing away from the table now, his hackles raised. The sound stopped. I stared at the box for a long time, every hair on my arms standing up. Then I did something I can't explain. I reached back in and grabbed the sweater. It was still warm. I dropped it instantly. The heat wasn't like something from a dryer, and it was deeper, internal, as if the fabric had its own pulse. When it hit the floor, something slid out from inside the folds. A photograph. Old, slightly yellowed. It was of my living room, this living room, but from an angle that didn't exist. The shot was taken from somewhere higher, like the corner near the ceiling, and in the photo I was sitting on the couch, wearing that same red sweater. I didn't touch the box again for the rest of the day. I kept it sealed in a trash bag and left it on the porch just to get it out of the house. Lauren finally texted me back around midnight. "What sweater? I haven't been home all week." Why I didn't reply? I didn't even want to read it again, because just then Baxter started barking at the front door. Not his usual bark, but a full panicked snarl. When I looked through the peephole, there was nothing there. Nothing except the black box sitting neatly on the welcome mat. The same silver bow, the same card, except now, under the original message, "For when it gets cold again," someone had added one more line. "It's getting colder." I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch with every light in the house on, watching the front door through the reflection on my TV screen. Baxter wouldn't stop pacing. Every few minutes he'd let out this low growl and glance toward the window like he could hear something I couldn't. I kept telling him to stop, but his tail stayed tucked tight. At around 3 a.m., I finally decided to check the porch again. I grabbed my phone flashlight, stepped to the door, and peered through the peephole. The box was gone. Just gone. The snow on the mat was untouched. Smooth except for the faint print of where the box had been. No footsteps. No drag marks, nothing. I opened the door slowly, cold air rushing in. Baxter barked behind me, deep and panicked. I stepped outside, scanning the porch, the steps, the yard. Nothing but the sound of wind through the bare trees and the quiet creak of my neighbor's flagpole. I went back inside, locked the door, and double-checked every window latch before sitting down again. The room felt smaller now. Even with the lights on, there was a strange dimness to the air, like the house itself was holding its breath. I finally dozed off around sunrise, head resting against the couch. When I woke up, Baxter was gone. I called for him, kitchen, hallway, backyard, nothing. His leash still hung by the door. His food bowl untouched. When I stepped into the living room, something caught my eye. The box was back. Not on the porch this time. Right under the tree. Same black paper. Same silver bow. The card now had 3 words written in that same small, perfect handwriting. "You forgot this." I felt something slide loose in my chest. A cold, hollow panic that made it hard to breathe. I didn't open it. I couldn't. I threw a towel over the whole thing, grabbed my phone, and called the police. The dispatcher sounded half asleep. I told her someone had been trespassing, leaving things inside my house. Any signs of forced entry? She asked. No, but any damage to property? No, but listen, sir, she said, her voice flat. It's probably a prank. Happens every year. People leaving fake gifts, scaring homeowners. I'll put in a report, but unless you have video evidence, video the security app. I hung up before she finished and opened the feed on my phone. The porch camera showed nothing after midnight, just static where the box had been. I switched to the living room cam, the one I'd set up last year to keep an eye on Baxter while I worked. At first, it was all normal. Me on the couch, lights on, Baxter walking around. Then at 3:18 a.m., the feed glitched. The screen went dark for exactly 7 seconds. When it came back, the box was sitting under the tree again. And something else, just before the feed froze again, a faint figure appeared near the corner of the frame. It wasn't clear, just the suggestion of someone standing in the shadows. Tall and still, they were holding something in their hands. When I paused the video and zoomed in, my stomach turned. It was Baxter's collar. I called Lauren again, half out of panic, half out of desperation. She picked up on the third ring. Hey, she said, groggy. You okay? I didn't know how to start. Did anyone come by your house last night? No, why? Because someone was here. They left that same box again. And I stopped. A soft thump came from the hallway behind me. Hold on, I whispered. I turned, every muscle in my body tight. Nothing moved. The air felt heavy, like before a storm. Then the Christmas lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then the power went out completely. My phone flashlight was the only glow left in the room. The beam shook as I aimed it toward the tree. The box was open, the paper peeled back perfectly, the bow placed neatly to the side. Inside was the red sweater again, but this time it was folded differently. The sleeves were crossed like arms, and tucked inside the collar was another photograph. This one wasn't old or yellowed. It was brand new. It showed my front door. The picture had been taken from inside my house, and in the bottom corner you could see me asleep on the couch. The power came back a few minutes later, but I didn't stay to see what else might happen. I grabbed my keys, ran outside, and drove straight to Lauren's house 20 minutes away. When I got there, she looked terrified. She said I was pale, shaking. I told her everything, the box, the pictures, Baxter. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she went to her closet and pulled something out from the top shelf. A black box. Identical to mine. Silver bow, no tag. She said she'd found it that morning under her tree. We both stared at it, neither of us moving. Then the box gave a soft, dull thump. Once, twice. Like something inside had a heartbeat. Lauren didn't want to touch the box. Neither did I. It sat on her coffee table like a sleeping animal, silent but somehow aware. The air in the room felt thick, stale, like we'd both stopped breathing. I didn't open it, she said finally. I don't even know how it got here. I locked up last night. Everything was fine. Did you check your cameras? I asked. She nodded and handed me her phone. The footage was clear, time-stamped at 3:19 a.m. A snowstorm blurred most of the view, but for a few seconds the porch light caught something moving. A dark figure standing just beyond the edge of the frame. Tall, unmoving, holding what looked like a small box, then static. When the video came back, the porch was empty except for that black box, perfectly centered on the welcome mat. Lauren swallowed hard. It was the same time yours came back. Neither of us said what we were thinking, but it hung there anyway. A sick sort of symmetry. We both looked at the box again. I tried to be brave and peel back the paper, just enough to see inside. My fingers brushed the edge of the tape and the smell hit me. Metal, faint but sharp like pennies in cold water. I jerked my hand back. It's the same smell, Lauren frowned. What smell? I looked at her. You don't smell that? She shook her head slowly. By noon, we were at the police station. I told the officer everything, the packages, the photos, Baxter's disappearance. He listened, but his expression said it all before he even spoke. Look, sir, he said finally. There's no sign of forced entry, and no physical threat. Could be a prank, could be a delivery mix-up. We'll send someone to take a statement, but there's not much we can do without evidence of a crime. Someone broke into my house, I said. They took my dog. They're watching us. He sighed, jotting notes on a clipboard. You said you live near Ridgeway Drive? We've had a few calls from that area lately. Strange deliveries, noises at night. Could be kids. I felt Lauren tense beside me. What kind of deliveries? She asked. He flipped through his notes. Boxes left on doorsteps. Black wrapping paper, no sender. Usually empty when opened. I felt the hair on my neck rise. Did anyone figure out who's doing it? He shook his head. We think it's someone's idea of a joke. Started about 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago. Right when I put up my tree. We left the station with more questions than answers. The drive back to Lawrence was quiet except for the rhythmic squeak of the wipers. The world outside looked washed out, snow and sky blending together into one endless gray. When we got inside, the box was gone. Lauren froze. It was right here. I searched the living room, the hallway, the kitchen. Nothing. Then we both heard it, a faint scraping sound from upstairs, like something heavy being dragged across the floor. Lauren's eyes met mine. That's the attic. We crept up the stairs, each step creaking louder than the last. The sound stopped just as we reached the landing. The attic door was slightly open. A thin line of dark showed between the frame and the door. I reached out and pushed it. The hinges squealed. The smell hit us immediately. That same metallic coldness, stronger now. Inside, the black box sat in the center of the attic floor. The silver bow gleamed faintly in the dim light, and next to it, laid out neatly, was another photograph. I picked it up carefully. It was of Lauren and me, standing in her driveway. Taken from behind, from a height, as if from an upstairs window or a tree. The timestamp on the corner read 11:42 a.m. 10 minutes ago, Lauren whispered, "We should burn it." I nodded. We grabbed the box and carried it out back, still half expecting it to move in our hands. The snow fell hard, soaking through my sleeves. I found the old fire pit and dumped the box inside. I lit a match, tossed it in. The paper caught immediately, curling into itself. The bow melted, dripping silver. For a second, it felt like victory. The flames roared higher, the black turning to orange, then gray. Then something inside the fire shifted, a sound, soft at first, then unmistakable, a heartbeat, thump, thump. The flames flickered with each beat, almost pulsing with it, and then a faint, warped voice came from inside the pit, like a recording played backward. "It's not yours to burn," Lauren screamed. I grabbed her arm and dragged her back into the house. We slammed the door, shaking, gasping. Through the window, we could still see the fire, the box collapsing inward as the flames turned blue. And just before it went out completely, something small rolled out of the ashes. A red button, identical to the ones on that sweater. We didn't speak for a long time after that. The clock ticked too loud. The heat barely worked. Finally, Lauren said, "It's like it wants us to keep it." I looked at the window again. Snow covered the fire pit now, erasing everything. Then we won't give it what it wants, but deep down, I wasn't sure what it even was anymore. That night, as we tried to sleep in the same room, I heard it again, faint, distant, but impossible to ignore. A soft, steady heartbeat, coming from under the floorboards. We didn't sleep. Lauren and I sat on the couch, wrapped in blankets, every lamp on, the hum of the furnace filling the silence between us. I could tell she heard it too, the faint, rhythmic thump beneath the floorboards. Sometimes it faded, sometimes it grew stronger, but it never stopped completely. Around 2 a.m., she whispered, "What if it's not new?" "What do you mean?" She looked pale, like she'd already been thinking about it for hours. What if this isn't the first time something like this happened to us? What if we just forgot? I wanted to argue, but something about the way she said it hit a nerve. There were things about our childhood we didn't talk about. Christmases that felt off, half-remembered sounds in the night. Our mom waking up crying and saying we'd had visitors. Visitors, that's what she used to call them. The next morning, Lauren pulled down an old photo box from her closet. Dust covered the lid, the label smudged. Xmas 1999-2003. We spread the photos on the floor. There were shots of us as kids, tinsel, wrapping paper, messy smiles. But one picture caught my attention. Christmas Eve 2001. We were standing beside the tree in our old house, both holding gifts. Behind us, near the corner of the room, was a dark shape. At first, I thought it was just a shadow. But the more I looked, the more it looked like someone standing there, tall and thin, blurred at the edges. The The same height as the figure in the porch video. Lauren noticed too. Do you remember anyone being there? I didn't. But the memory tugged at something buried. Our mom's voice that night telling us to stay in our rooms no matter what we heard. I flipped the photo over. On the back, written in our mom's handwriting, were 3 words. For when they return. We decided to go to the old house. It was only an hour away, empty since Mom passed. The realtor hadn't been able to sell it. Too much needed fixing, she'd said. The place looked smaller now, sagging under years of snow and silence. The yard was littered with pine branches. The front door stuck before opening. The smell inside thick with dust and something else. Cold, faintly metallic. The tree we'd used to put up in the corner was gone, but the outline of its shadow still stained the carpet. We moved through the rooms in silence until we reached the attic door. Lauren looked at me. You heard it too, right? That sound? I nodded. The stairs groaned as we climbed. It felt colder up there, like the air didn't belong to this season. Dust swirled around us, glittering in weak light from the small round window. Then we saw it. Another black box tucked neatly against the far wall. The paper was faded, the silver bow tarnished gray. It looked old, like it had been there for years waiting. Lauren whispered, "It's the same kind." I knelt down, heart pounding. My hands trembled as I brushed off the dust. The tag was still attached, barely hanging on by a thread. In the same small handwriting as before, for when it gets cold again. Inside was a small tape recorder, the kind Mom used to keep for voice notes. I pressed the play button, half expecting it to be dead. Instead, the tape whirred, and then our mom's voice filled the attic. "If you're hearing this, it means they've found you again." Her voice cracked halfway through the sentence, trembling. "Don't take anything they leave. Don't wear it. Don't burn it. Just bury it. Deep. They follow warmth, they feed on it." There was a faint tapping in the background of the recording. Then a low hum, a heartbeat. Mom's breathing quickened. "They come when the air goes still, when the house stops breathing. They come for families first." The tape clicked off. Lauren sank down on the floor, shaking. She knew. All this time she knew. I stared at the recorder, unable to speak. The sound still echoed in my ears. That dull, steady heartbeat from somewhere too close to ignore. We buried the box behind the old house, in the frozen ground beneath the oak tree. The earth resisted hard as stone, but we dug until our hands went numb. When the last of it was covered, we stood in silence. I thought maybe, finally it was done. That night, back at Lauren's place, I was brushing my teeth when I noticed the reflection behind me in the bathroom mirror. At first, I thought it was her, standing in the doorway, half asleep. But the figure didn't move, didn't breathe, just stood there, a tall shadow with something bright red draped over its arm. A sweater. I spun around, but the doorway was empty. Only when I turned back to the mirror again, my breath fogging the glass, did I see the words slowly appear across it. Written from the inside, "It's getting colder." I ran to Lauren's room, yelling her name, but she was already sitting up in bed, wide-eyed. She pointed to the window. The black box sat outside on the porch, snow falling softly around it. The bow untouched, and when I looked closer, I realized the card was gone. In its place, written directly on the paper in thin, looping script, "You didn't bury it deep enough." We didn't open the door, not this time. Lauren and I just stood there, staring through the frosted glass at that black box resting on the porch, snow piling around it like it had been waiting hours for us to wake up. Neither of us moved. The house was silent, so silent it felt wrong. No wind against the windows, no hum from the furnace. Even the refrigerator had stopped its low mechanical buzz. The house wasn't breathing again. And deep beneath that stillness, so faint it almost blended into my heartbeat, came the sound. Thump, thump, slow, patient, steady. Lauren whispered, "We have to burn it again." "No," I said. The memory of the fire flashing in my head, the blue flames, the voice whispering through the smoke. Mom said not to. Not to burn it, not to wear it. She said to bury it. Lauren's eyes were glassy. We did bury it. And we both turned almost at the same time toward the back door. The air near it was colder, so cold that our breath hung white and heavy. The lock was unlatched. I knew I'd locked it. I remembered the click. There were footprints leading into the house. We moved room to room with the flashlights from our phones. The light beams trembled, catching on dust, furniture, the slow drift of snowflakes carried in by the open door. "Hello?" Lauren called, her voice breaking halfway. "Who's there?" Silence. Then, from upstairs, the faintest scrape like fabric brushing against the wall. We climbed the stairs together. My hand brushed the railing, cold as metal left in the snow. At the top of the stairs, I saw it, the red sweater. It was laid neatly across the floor outside the guest room, sleeves crossed over the chest just like before, and beneath it another photo. This one was darker, blurrier. A shot of Lauren and me standing by the fire pit yesterday. Someone had been watching from the trees. "Enough," I said, my voice shaking. "We end this." Lauren didn't argue. She just nodded, tears in her eyes. We grabbed the old box of Mom's things, the one she'd kept locked in her closet for years. Inside were notebooks, loose pages, scraps of paper filled with her small, frantic handwriting. The words repeated again and again. They follow warmth. They remember the bloodline. Never accept the gift. One page was different, folded neatly, less frantic. A kind of instruction: if they return, find where it began. Don't let the ground freeze before it's done. Lauren read it aloud in a whisper. Where it began. Our old house. The place where we'd found the first box. The drive back felt endless. The snow fell heavier now, swirling in thick sheets. The road was empty. The world outside blurred and white. Neither of us spoke. When we pulled up to the old house, I saw them before the car even stopped. Shapes moving in the yard. Not solid. Not human. Just the faintest suggestion of figures pacing slowly around the oak tree where we'd buried the box. Lauren grabbed my arm. "You see them?" I nodded, unable to speak. We stepped out into the snow, shovels in hand. The figures didn't move toward us, didn't stop us. They just waited. The ground was frozen hard. We dug anyway, our breaths coming out in clouds. My hands went numb fast, skin cracking against the wood handle. When the blade finally hit something hollow, I stopped. The box was there, but it wasn't alone. There were two now, one new. One old. Lauren stared at them, whispering, "It's multiplying." The wind rose then, sharp and cold enough to sting. The figures around us shifted closer, their shapes clearer in the stormlight. Their faces were wrong, blurred, unfinished, as if someone had started to draw them and stopped halfway. I dug my hand into my pocket and pulled out Mom's recorder. I pressed play. Her voice crackled through the speaker, faint under the wind. "Don't let them take what's warm. Don't let them remember your name." I didn't understand until I realized Lauren wasn't beside me anymore. She was standing near the tree, the red sweater in her hands. "Lauren, no. I think it's hers," she said softly. "Mom's, look." She pointed at the tag inside the collar. It was faint, half worn away, but the name stitched there was unmistakable. L.H., her initials. "I think it's always been meant for me." Before I could stop her, she slipped the sweater over her shoulders. The heartbeat that had been buried under the snow roared to life. Deep, thunderous, shaking the ground. The figures stopped moving, then one by one, they knelt. Lauren gasped, her breath turning white. Frost spread up her arms across her neck. The sweater pulsed against her chest like it was alive, drawing warmth out of her skin. I grabbed her, but the cold burned my hands. "Take it off," I shouted. She looked at me, eyes glassy, and whispered, "It's so warm." Then she went still. The heartbeat slowed, stopped, and the snow fell silent. When I opened my eyes again, it was morning. The tree, the boxes, the figures gone. Just the snow and the open hole where the boxes had been. Lauren's sweater lay folded neatly in the center of it. I buried it again, deeper this time. I didn't look back. When I drove home, the world felt lighter, quieter. For the first time in days, I thought maybe it was over. But when I walked inside, the living room smelled faintly of pine. The Christmas lights flickered once, and under the tree there was a single gift, black paper. Silver bow, the card read, "For when she gets cold again." For 3 days I didn't touch it. Didn't move it. Didn't even look at it longer than a second. The box sat there under the tree like a threat wrapped in paper, perfect, untouchable, patient. The red sweater shadow hung over me even without it in sight. Every time I walked past the living room, I caught that faint metallic scent. It wasn't strong, but it was there. like blood on cold air, like memory refusing to fade. I tried everything. Blasting music, keeping the lights on all night, unplugging the cameras, even sleeping in the car once. But somehow I always ended up back inside before morning. I'd wake up on the couch, no idea how I got there. And every time the box would be a little closer to me, first under the tree, then by the coffee table, then on the couch beside me. I started leaving the TV on for noise, even though I couldn't stand the sound. The newscasters talked about record-breaking cold, about people going missing on the outskirts of town. The storm had taken out half the power grid. No one was going anywhere. Christmas was over, but the box stayed. On the fourth night, I heard knocking, 3 soft taps against the front door. I froze. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't wood creaking. It was deliberate. Baxter used to scratch the door when he wanted to come in. I could still picture that motion, the rhythmic tap, tap, tap of his paws. But this was heavier, slower. I walked to the door, my heart pounding in my throat. The peephole was dark, covered in frost from the outside. I wiped it with my thumb and looked through. Nothing. Just snow falling under the porch light. I started to step back, and that's when I heard it again. The faint hum. The heartbeat. Coming from inside the house. The box was gone. I spun in circles, panic rising in my chest. I checked the kitchen, the hall, the living room. Nothing. Then I heard a soft creak from upstairs, the sound of a door opening slowly. I moved toward the staircase, the boards under my feet freezing cold. Each step I took echoed like the house was hollow. The upstairs hallway was dark except for a thin line of light spilling from my bedroom door. When I reached the top, the smell hit me again, metallic, sharp, mixed with something sweet. The box sat on my bed, unwrapped. The paper folded neatly beside it, the silver bow coiled like a dead snake. Inside was a single photograph. Lauren. She was standing in the yard by the oak tree, snow swirling around her. Her face was pale, lips blue, eyes unfocused, and around her shoulders was the red sweater, except it didn't look like fabric anymore. It looked alive, like it was growing into her skin. I stumbled backward, dropping the photo. My legs hit the wall and I slid down to the floor, shaking. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But my hands moved on their own. Hello? Static, then a voice, faint, familiar. It's so warm. My stomach dropped. Lauren? The line clicked and then I heard it. Not through the phone, through the vents. Her voice echoing through the walls, whispering the same 3 words over and over. It's so warm. It's so warm. It's so warm. I ran outside barefoot, the cold biting through my skin. The snow was waist deep by the trees, the world around me deathly still. I made it to the spot where we buried the boxes and started digging with my hands, ripping through the frozen soil. When I reached the earth beneath, my fingers hit something hard. I clawed at it, pulling until it came loose. It wasn't a box this time. It was wood, a coffin, small, unfinished, splintered, and carved into the lid were 4 words, burned deep into the grain. For when he's cold, I screamed until my throat tore. I don't know how long I stayed there, kneeling in the snow, my hands bleeding from frostbite. But when I looked up, the world around me was moving, slow, deliberate shapes walking between the trees. They were all wearing red, not fabric, skin. Their bodies glowed faintly in the dark, the same pulse I'd felt in that sweater, slow, steady, alive. And one of them was smaller than the rest. It stopped a few feet away. Even through the storm, I could see its face, Lauren's. Her eyes were blank, her mouth moving soundlessly, but I could still read the shape of the words, "It's getting colder." Then the figures turned, one by one, and began to walk toward the house. I don't remember running. I just remember light. The faint orange of fire, the crackle of wood, the way the house screamed as it burned. When the neighbors found me the next morning, I was lying in the snow, half-conscious, mumbling something they couldn't understand. They said there was no sign of anyone else. No footprints. No remains, just ashes. And in the middle of them, untouched by flame, a black box. They said I must have imagined it all. That trauma does strange things to memory. That grief can twist reality. Maybe they're right. But last night, as I sat in the motel, the heater rattling in the corner, I heard it again, that soft heartbeat under the floor. When I looked down, something was waiting just by the leg of the bed. A small black box, silver bow. The card read, "For when the fire goes out."